Okay, we're going to do a patch with Mimic. The first thing we want to make sure is we have square cut shoulders everywhere. We have a properly prepped surface. So you can see we have square cut shoulders. We have a minimum of a 1/2 inch depth here. We need to make sure that we create an SSD condition in the substrate. So we need to saturate the substrate, but we don't want any pooling water. Any water down here that's pooling, we're going to want to get that out of there. I have a sponge. We'll do that. All right. So SSD stands for saturated surface dry. So it should be dry to the touch, no pooling water, but there's plenty of moisture within the substrate. All right, we're going to be doing a Mimic patch. The Mimic material is typically mixed 5 parts powder to 1 part water. So as that starts to dry a little bit, we're going to mix up 5 parts powder.
Right. Okay.
And part water. When you mix up the material, to get it to the right consistency, if you roll it over in the bucket, you should see some clumping. I tell people it's about golf ball size clumps you'll see. If it's all sandy, it's too dry. If you roll it over and it's all one big clump, it's too wet. So that's about the consistency that you like. In the training class, we always say it should be the consistency of like damp beach sand. So if you ever built sandcastles as a kid, that damp beach sand like quality is what you want to have. Now, if I place this material, this 5-to-1 mix, directly on the substrate, I'm not going to get a very good bond. This material doesn't have any bonding agents in it, so in order to create a bond, we have to put a bond coat on. Some people call it a slurry coat. We like to call it a bond coat because it's a little bit thicker than a slurry coat, which is like a painted on thickness. Very, very, very thin. So just I like to use a cup. Keep some material. It's going to have like a putty-like consistency.
Okay.
Is that good? Okay. So I have that putty. And I'm going to apply the putty to the SSD surface at a 1/16 of an inch. So nice and thin. You can use a brush for this to work it into the corners, but be sure that you don't it does need to have a little bit of thickness, 1/16 of an inch. Make sure you don't have it too heavy in the corners, but also make sure that you get your shoulders. The shoulders need to be well bonded, so everywhere where we need a bond, we need to have this putty coat. And if it's too heavy in some areas, you can always take some off. So before this putty coat starts to dry out, and it will dry out, especially if you don't have your SSD condition correct, you want to make sure you get your 5-to-1 material on the wall. So we're going to apply our dryer material. There's a few ways you can go about doing that. Some people will, you know, kind of put it on the back of their trowel, apply it right directly out of the bucket. Other people will use their hands. I recommend gloves if you're going to do that. But I like to make a clump with my hand, and if I have a 1/2 inch to fill or 2 inches, I can section that off, cut it off, and then work it back into the substrate. So I make sure I'm getting good compaction as I'm building it out. Then if I have open edges here, I can just kind of close off the edges. If you're right-handed, once you get to the left side, you're just going to give some compaction back into the left side. You want to make sure you overbuild. And again, work it back into the sides there. So we're building out beyond the profile of the substrate that we're repairing. Sometimes we call this the fat and ugly stage because it doesn't need to look pretty right now. We're just, again, building it out beyond the profile. So we want to make sure we don't have any low spots. We can use a straight edge, our miter rod. We're checking to make sure that we're built out beyond the original profile of the repair. If we're happy with that, then we can start cleaning up. We're going to clean up around the edges. We're going to have some mortar smears here. We can do a little bit of pre-finishing. If we've overbuilt too high, you only want to overbuild you know, 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. So if you're a little too high, you can take a little bit of that mortar and put it back into the bucket for the next repair. I like doing this also because it opens up the pores, helps the repair material dry out a little bit faster. And the last thing we need to do is make sure we don't have any mortar smears on the substrate. If we leave those mortar smears in the substrate, we're going to get a white halo. So we like to use a bucket of water with these rubber sponges. The rubber sponges are great for 2 reasons. 1, they don't hold a lot of water, and 2, they keep a nice sharp edge on the side here. So when we want to clean up, what I like to do is I'll bring that edge almost right up to the area. I'll make a swipe and then rotate the sponge, make another swipe, and keep rotating until I've used all 4 sides. Then dip it in water. Make sure you don't come up to the repair. You don't want any water going in the repair, or you could get one of those white halos. And right now we've got it to our pre-finished stage. So we're going to allow that material to set up. On a warm day, it could be ready in 15 to 20 minutes. On a cooler day, it could take a little over a half hour. But it's really temperature and humidity dependent. Once that material kicks, we'll know it's ready, because right now when we scrape it, there's very little sound and everything sticks to the miter rod. When it's ready, it's going to sound much like this. You're going to hear that scraping sound, and nothing's going to stick to the miter rod, or very little is going to stick to the miter rod, and the bulk of the repair material is going to come off as just grains of sand off the miter rod as you screed it.
Okay.
We're good.
Okay, great. Shaving.
So we know it's ready to shave when we do this, and we can see a lot of sand falling down there. We have very little sticking to the miter rod, so we're listening for that, and we're pretty close. So when you finish, the idea is not to take a lot of repair material at one time. You don't want to, you know, so I've seen some guys kind of knife it down. You don't want to do that. It's almost like you're just taking a little bit at a time. You always want to go into your edges, so where you have the patch, and if I was going up here, I wouldn't want to start up here and then come out, or I could pull the patch away from the substrate. So I always want to go into the edges like that. All right, and then on corners, you always start at the corner and work your way in. So I'm always coming that way, and then when I do the corner this way, I'll start at the edge and go into the repair. I have seen some guys, they'll kind of use this as a base and maybe just take a little bit at a time to keep, you know, get a nice sharp corner. It's always a good idea. And again, the key is not to take too much at a time. This one's a little tricky because you got this little corner here. Everything that's coming off the patch right now also is dead material, so you can't put that back in the bucket to be used somewhere else. This material has started to set up, and it's no longer good patching material. I just have to get, there's a little bit in the corners here. That out. Now at this point, you have your finished repair. You could do lots of different things. Sorry guys. What you may want to do is you're trying to mimic the texture around. So, you know, right now we have a nice sharp corner because that's what you know, you get when you finish it. But if you have a weathered finish, you may want to round that corner off a little bit so it's not as sharp, so it matches the surrounding substrate. If the substrate's a little bit smoother, now's the point where you can give it, you know, one pass with the margin trowel, just kind of knock it down. Give it a little bit smoother of a texture. Try and match the texture that's surrounding. And also, this is the last opportunity for you to get any mortar smears. So if you missed any, like down here, it looks like we missed a little bit of our mortar smearing. So we're going to get our sponge with our clean water again, and we're just going to hit that area one more time, get those mortar smears out. Make sure we don't have any halos around our repair. Sorry.
No, we're good.
Now these have been patched a couple times, so some of this is embedded in there from our previous training classes and stuff, but you get the idea of, you know, making sure you give that one more pass.
Okay, cool.
All right.
So that was finishing Mimic.
Finishing Mimic.